Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. When I was doing the clamp repairs, I mentioned that I was wearing a face shield. I mostly wear a face shield because I have corrective lenses. That way I don't have to try and fit my glasses into something like this. Doesn't work so well. This face shield is specifically designed for gas welding. You don't want to wear it when you're arc welding. It's only about a shade 5. It does prevent UV. It is a Huntsman H9154D. I wear it because it not only protects me from the UV, it keeps sparks from the cutting torch and pops and blowback from the cutting torch coming up and hitting me in the face. I know, I'm not that beautiful, but I certainly don't want to have burn marks on my face or get burned. Big thing I'm going to talk about today is the UV damage though. Just because you're wearing goggles doesn't prevent UV damage. These goggles are shade 5. They work for oxyacetylene. Oxyacetylene emits UV light just like an arc welder, just a smaller amount. Shade 5, that's enough for most purposes. You want to check whatever job you're doing to make sure that shade 5 is the one that you want to use. And if you wear glasses, you don't have just the face shield. You can wear these. Before I got the face shield, I bought this there. And it works quite well. It protects your eyes against the UV and also provides a little dust protection. Doesn't keep the rest of your face from getting burned though. UV, just like coming down from the sun, gives you a sunburn. Some of you already know that I worked at the Midwest Foundry when I was a kid. When I first started there, they were just beginning to put the dust collection system on. The dust collection system was a way to capture all the gases and smoke and fumes and dust from the foundry and bring it into this one huge dust collecting cabinet. Well, that meant that there had to be stack put over the top of the cupola. There were airlines run over the whole plant, and they all went back to this huge cabinet with a 400 horsepower fan in there that sucked all the smoke, dust, and dirt out of the air and up into that cabinet. When I first started at the foundry, you couldn't see across the pouring floor. You really couldn't see for all the smoke. After the dust collection system was up and running, it was really quite clear. You could see clear across and no problem, clear across the whole shop. But I'm going to tell you a little story about doing some of the work. Because we had so much welding to do, they hired some extra guys. Yeah, Midwest Foundry actually paid for extra people to come in and handle some of the work. One of the guys that came in was a certified welder. And he came in, he started working. He went up on the cupola deck, way up in the air, and he was supposed to be welding down grading on the deck. Well, he came down that afternoon and he had a pair of these in his hand. And he had 2 white circles around his eyes. He'd been welding, arc welding, with a pair of oxyacetylene goggles. He didn't come back to work the next day. He should have known better. We never thought to say, hey, do you know what you're doing? He was a certified welder. At least he said he was. You don't want to use these for arc welding because the arc generates a high concentration of UV light. Just like laying in the sun for a full day, it'll cook you raw. There's another reason. UV light gets concentrated by the lens in your eye. The lens in your eye, it focuses the light on the macula, which is the back of your eye, the retina. There's a small spot on it called the macula. That's where the highest concentration of rods and cones are, and you can see finer detail in that area. That's why you see things better when you look straight at them. Stuff in the peripheral, you'll see things moving because there's more rods in the peripheral part of your retina. You'll see things moving quite clearly, but you won't necessarily notice color, shape, or size as well out on the side. You'll just see it coming. Good thing when you're out on the plains and something comes charging at you from the side, you'll see it moving at you and you get out of the way. So, because your lens concentrates that light, if you're looking at an arc, it'll burn a spot in the back of your eye. Now, how do I know this? When I was 35, I noticed that my eyes were not as sharp as they used to be. I used to have 20/20 vision. Up until I was about 30, never had a problem with my eyes. As time went on, I noticed that I was having more and more difficulty seeing things. Funny story, I was out playing golf with some friends. We were over at Litchfield, and Litchfield has a odd first hole. You tee off over a hill, you don't get to see the green. So the only way you know if somebody's on the green is somebody has to stand up on a bench and you can look over the top of the hill and see if anybody's standing down there. So my friend said, hey, look and see if there's anybody on the green now. So I stood up, looked down there. There was a couple of guys down there putting in, and I said, oh, there's a couple of guys down there. So I stood down. We waited a few minutes, more than enough time for them to putt out. They said, look again. So I climbed up on the bench, looked, and I said, yeah, there's still one guy down there. So we waited. A couple minutes later, they said, look again. Climbed up and I said, he's still there. My buddy got up on the bench with me. He said, I don't see anybody. I said, he's down there. He's got a red shirt on. He said, that's a trash can. Yeah, I figured I needed glasses. So I went to see Bruce Young, Dr. Bruce Young. Bruce Young and I went to school together, so it was natural that I would go see him. We were chatting as I was sitting in the chair. He's looking in my eyes and he said, were you a welder? I said, yeah, how'd you know? He said, you got burn marks on the back of your eyes. That's when he told me about the lens focusing the light in the back of your eye. He also told me something else. You want to be real careful about indirect UV. Now, what's indirect UV? I used to work at a place called L&S Products. L&S Products was a little weld shop that made display furniture for stores. You know, the things that they hang the clothes on so you can go in and look at, like Walmart, Myers, used to be Sears. You get the idea. We made a lot of fixtures. Well, since it was fixture work, we had all these jigs sitting around and we would weld on the jigs. Now, each one of us had our own booth, but you might have more than one guy welding on opposite sides of a bench. Well, this was the early 70s, and we didn't have all the weld curtains and MIOSHA laws that we do now. So you didn't have to have flash glasses. Some of the guys didn't wear them. I didn't own a pair. So when the guy on your bench was welding something, before he struck an arc, he'd say, cover, and we'd either flip our hood down or we would look away. Well, because I'm in a welding shop with 30 other welders, looking away didn't necessarily make it so that I didn't see a weld flash. It was a different angle. It wasn't right in front of me, but there was arcs flashing all the time. Well, there's another thing in the back of your eye besides the macula. The optic nerve comes through the back of your eye and joins the retina in a little spot. If one of those flashes just happens to hit that nerve just right, you can go blind. After Bruce told me that, I was much more careful, and when I worked in a welding shop, I wore flash glasses. Now, I didn't work as a welder anymore. I was a supervisor, but I was still conscious of the fact that I was walking through a shop where people were striking arcs all the time. Now, by the end of the 70s, MIOSHA had gotten into pretty good full swing. So we had weld curtains and we had protection. But if you walked into a weld booth where somebody was welding, you still could get light into your eyes. The other thing that can happen is you can get reflected light. Somebody welding 2 booths away can be welding something, it can go up, bounce off something, and come down into your eyes. You want to be careful about that too. While I was working at the Midwest Foundry, after we got all the dust collection system put in, a couple of years later, we had a break in the oscillating conveyor from the mold line. All the molds dumped off the mold line into the oscillating conveyor and were carried down to shakeout. Well, it was a big vibrating conveyor that worked like this. It was actually made in 3 sections. It was 100 foot long and one drive wasn't enough to move it. So they made it 3 sections with 3 separate drives on it. What it did is it oscillated. It would throw the sand up, rotate around, swing back, and the sand would fall on it, and it would throw it up again and move the sand down the line. Did that with these big eccentric weights that caused the conveyor to vibrate. Well, what had happened, because the 2 conveyor drive systems weren't in tune, one was going up and the other one wasn't quite up. So they started breaking, and the 2 sections broke in half, and so we had both ends of the conveyor banging into each other. Boom, boom, boom. So my job was to go in and weld those 2 sections together. Now this thing's made out of 1/2-inch plate steel, and it's about 36 inches wide and had sides on it about 8 inches tall, so it would carry the sand down to the shakeout. I went in there with a grinder, V'd out the weld, welded it back up, spent the whole day with rod and a big old 400 amp DC generator welder, just welding away. It was actually great work. It was clean steel, it was nice position, and I kind of enjoyed it. It was 3/16 rod. I had a 400 amp DC welder. I was able to just lay in a lot of bead. It was kind of fun. Because of all the dust and everything that had been pulled through the hood, it polished the inside of that like a mirror. So as I was down there welding, with a welding helmet just like this one, the light was going up, hitting the hood, coming down, hitting the back of the lens, which is like a mirror, and reflecting into my eyes. I welded almost a full day in there. The next morning when I woke up, my eyes felt like they were full of sand. Hurt? Oh yeah. Haven't had that feeling since, well, it would be 1973. I took precautions after that, but I spent 3 days with tea bags on my eyes. I don't know why tea bags, but that's what was recommended. It felt better with the tea bags on. So maybe it was just having the cool wet. I don't know if the tea made any difference. Don't use that as a medicine just because I'm saying so. That's what we did back then. Of course, 1973, that is 50 years ago. Close to. 50 years ago, we got a lot better. Talk to your optometrist. But best thing, just don't get yourself in those kind of situations. If you're welding in that kind of condition, get a cover over the back of your welding hood. They make a really nice air supplied hood now that you can put on. It blows cool air up into the hood and prevents having any of that smoke get into the hood. You don't want to breathe smoke from steel. It doesn't make any sense to me as an old guy that, hey, wait a minute, it never bothered me, but I don't know what all's going on. I spent, well, the first 10 years of my life working as a welder or around welders and in foundries and places where they did a lot of burning and cutting and iron dust. Well, turns out iron dust can cause problems for you. So you might want to think about one of those hoods. But it also protects you from the UV light. Covers the back of your head, keeps you from getting burnt. Now, I started out with a welding hood like this, just a regular old lens. They came out with these flip-up lenses so that you could just flip the hood lens up and not have to flip the whole hood up. That was nice when you're welding in a situation where there's other welders, because the hood kept you from getting quite as many flashes from the side. But it was heavy, awkward. I didn't like it. Now, they've come up with these. This is a Harbor Freight. It's a cheap one, but it works. This is an electronic hood. Electronic hoods have a little sensor that detects the light from the welding arc, and within 1/250th of a second, it flips on an LCD and goes to a darker shade. Has a setting on it so you can change the settings to a darker or lighter shade. It works. Everything I read says it works. I'm still a little cautious about it because, let's see, 1/250,000th of a second. That's pretty short. But how much damage is that UV doing to your eyes in that short burst of time? I don't know. I guess it would depend on how bright the UV is. The other thing that I noticed is people doing something that I consider to be really stupid. Another way you can get yourself in trouble is I've seen people doing this. They'll be welding on something and they'll have their hood on, and so that they can see a little bit easier to get the arc started, they'll hold the gun and then put their hand over it and just pull the trigger. They're doing a tack. They don't think it's anything important. Tack, 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 thinking that their hand keeps the light from getting in their eyes. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Remember that nerve back there, the optic nerve? All it takes is one, and you're gone. You're blind. One eye, maybe both. Don't want to get yourself in those kind of situations. With these electronic helmets, you can see the position of the stinger, and when you pull the trigger, you know you're in the right spot. Also, that electronic lens shuts off the light in 1/250,000th of a second. Much better than relying on arc, just having your hand to protect you. Also, there's a guy over here on the other side of this big machine that you're working on. One of the places that I worked made the main frame for the M24 grader made by Caterpillar. Yeah, the beam was like 48 feet long, and you'd have multiple welders working on this beam. So this guy over here is striking an arc, bang, 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 and you're striking an arc, bang, 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 thinking that, well, I'm protected by my hand, but that guy over there is still welding. So just be cautious. Plasma cutters. Plasma cutter is an arc. It has UV light. Wear a welding helmet when you're running a plasma cutter. Doesn't take much. Just wear a welding helmet. I don't know, they may have come out with a shield like this for doing plasma cutting. If they have, great. Shield like that's a lot lighter, a lot cooler, a lot easier to use, and it protects you against all the splash and everything that a welding helmet does without all the weight. Also, it gives you a much broader field of view. But I haven't seen one in a shade 8, nothing higher than 5. So, use your own discretion. So that's enough of my lecture today. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know, I read them all. Thanks for watching. And like the guy on the cop shows used to say, be safe out there.